Hello friends, today I'm going to tell you about the first season of a science fiction series consisting of 10 episodes called The World of the Wild West. This is a new world, and in this world, you will become whatever the fuck you want. There is a girl on the podium. An invisible male voice communicates with her, orders to remove the accent, and asks questions. The girl wakes up, goes out on the porch, greets her father, and goes to study. A train rides on the prairie. Passengers admire the surrounding beauty. Their monetary costs correspond to expectations. A typical Wild West town: horses, dust, street urchins, announcements about criminals and the sheriff. The arriving man enters the bar and orders a whiskey. A girl of easy virtue approaches him, but he refuses her services. And suddenly, he sees a girl from the first frames, Dolores. The man approaches her. From the conversation, it becomes clear she was waiting for his return because he promised it. Dolores says her father won't be happy with him. The couple returns home when it's already dark. Near the house, they see bandits who shoot the girl's family. The guy opens fire and kills the criminals. The sobbing Dolores is addressed by a man in black who has appeared out of the darkness. He's been coming here for 30 years, and she still doesn't remember him. Teddy shoots a man, but his bullets do no harm. The man in black grabs and drags the screaming girl into the barn. He likes her resistance because he doesn't pay for lightness. The man in black kills Teddy, who rushes to help. In the next frame, a repetition of the plot just past. Morning, Dolores, father, train, Teddy alive and unharmed. The panorama pulls away, and it becomes clear that this is all a mock-up. And around the laboratory, in which androids are grown, indistinguishable from humans, two researchers, Bernard and Elsie, are watching an android girl. They notice an atypical gesture for a robot. This is a memory that it should not have, which means that the general manager Ford has again introduced something new into his program. He calls it dreams, and such a change threatens trouble. The head of the Quality Assurance Department at the Wild Westworld Park, Teresa Cullen, informs Bernard that there is unplanned activity of androids in the refrigerator. She orders an operational response team to be sent there in full protection. Bernard also decides to go with them. An armed team descends into a large hall filled with frozen androids. In the fenced-off parts of the hall, Ford and one of the first-generation hosts are sitting at a chessboard. They drink and socialize. After seeing Bernard, Ford says that the first ones often broke down. Bernard says that he has seen new dreams, and it's amazing. After that, Ford gives the command to Bill to pack, and the android obediently goes to his place, Dolores' house again. The girl communicates with her father, and he asks to return her before dark because the bandit who shot the marshal is still hiding in the hills. The girl promises to do it. Teddy gets off the train again at the station of the town. The conversation in the saloon repeats. Teddy sees Dolores through the window again, but the man in black is ahead of him. He talks to a girl who does not remember him at all, and therefore is not at all alarmed. He compliments her and informs her that today he has other plans, and he will not look in on her. The girl is puzzled. The man in black walks into the salon and sits down to play poker. The sheriff's squad is riding across the prairie. They have visitors with them. The sheriff notices a lying body. He says that the criminal has clearly been here. At this moment, a fly lands on the sheriff's cheek, and he suddenly begins to stutter and generally looks like a broken doll. The guests get scared, leave the sheriff, and turn their horses. In the next frame, Sheriff Pickett, who was returned to the laboratory, the creator of the plots for the park, Lee Sizemore, is unhappy with Bernard and wants to know exactly what happened. Teresa demands from Bernard to clarify whether this can happen because of the updates. Bernard does not rule this out and asks how many hosts have already been updated. He is informed that these are 200 characters. Teresa demands to roll back the update. Sizemore is outraged because if 200 characters are removed at once, the storyline will irreparably change. Teresa doesn't care about it. For her, the main thing is safety. Teddy is sitting on the porch of the saloon. A fly is crawling on the guy's cheek, but he doesn't seem to notice it. Dolores' father notices something strange under his feet. He bends down and picks up a modern photo that shows the returned daughter. He is very surprised. The girl says it doesn't look like anything, and then goes to help her mother with dinner. Bernard finds Ford, who is overseeing the creation of a new android, and reports the mistakes made. Ford says that man is also a big mistake. People violated the laws of evolution. They began to save the weak, heal the hopeless. This means that people are already finished. They will not be able to develop further. In the desert, A man in black watches the bleeding croupier Kissy. He is trying to get answers to the question of where the secret levels of the park are located. After his refusal, the man in black scalps him. A map showing a maze is found on the scalp. Morning. As usual, Dolores comes out on the porch and greets her father, but he's sitting there staring, and he's still looking at the photo. He begins to speak in riddles. Frightened, Dolores calls her mother, and at this moment, her father quite consciously tells her that she must leave because hell is empty and devils are all here. He whispers something in her ear. The girl rides for the doctor and meets Teddy. She asks him to go with her because her father is very ill. They fall silent at the sight of a group of horsemen hiding their faces under their capes. This is the elusive Hector's gang. The bandit kills the sheriff and enters the salon, clutching the end of the rope in his hands. The other end of it is tied to the horse. Teddy and Dolores hide from the shots, but the girl says that she needs to go back to her father, and they leave the shelter. Teddy is injured. Dolores is crying next to him. Teddy repeats his standard text. Bandits on the second floor of the saloon tie a rope around the safe and throw it over the railing. Hearing the whistle, Hector's horse takes off, dragging the safe behind him. Hector rips the notices of his capture from the wall. He starts to make a speech, but one of the guests kills him, and then his accomplice. Dolores says goodbye to the dying Teddy. She's desperate. Elsie approaches her and turns her off with a conditional phrase. She calls the staff to pick up 2 more. Hosts are carried on gurneys. Bernard informs Teresi that most of them are fine, except for Dolores' father, Peter Abernathy. Stubbs and Elsie include Dolores. The girl is scared. It's like she's not herself. The man asks her about her father and the picture. She says her father was scared. Teresa says that Peter needs to be turned off because he found out about them. But Ford objects. Wouldn't it be better to find out how he did it first? At this time, an investigation is underway at the ranch about Burnett. People walk around with flashlights and in uniform. They hide the found photo in a plastic bag. Dr. Ford asks Peter to download the previous configuration. Peter comes to his senses and starts talking about his daughter. She is the main one for him, and he must protect her. And then he gets confused again. The daughter has to get out. She needs to be warned. It seems to Bernard that this is no longer just a glitch. This is behavior. Peter says he wants to meet the creator. He intends to take cruel revenge. He grabs Dr. Ford by the shoulders. The security service disables it. Teresa demands an explanation. Bernard says they didn't program this behavior, and only Dr. Ford guesses the truth. Once upon a time, this host played the role of a professor from history in the horror genre who led a group of cannibal occultists and liked to quote Shakespeare. Bernard suggests that these are fragments of previous assemblies that dreams have opened access to. The doctor tries to calm the audience. In the next section, Stubbs continues to talk to Dolores. He asks her what her father whispered to her, and she utters a phrase from Shakespeare. Violent feelings have a violent end. In the following shots, Dolores wakes up in her bed, starting her usual cycle. She greets her father, who is already being played by another host, but Dolores does not notice this. Her memory has been updated. Teddy wakes up on the train, starting his new cycle. The man in black looks at the map inside the skull of the brush. Then he gets on a horse and goes into the desert. Dolores looks around the neighborhood and smiles. A fly lands on her neck. Dolores slaps her neck, killing a fly. This is the end of the first series. At the beginning of the second series, 2 men arrive at a modern train station, where they are met by people in white clothes. William is engaged to Logan's sister and works with him in the same company. Logan brought a friend to have fun because everything is possible here. Upon arrival, they are met by android girls. Angelica leads William into a room where Western-style clothing models are collected, as well as all kinds of weapons. And there are no instructions, because it's half the fun to figure out how it works yourself. The girl gives him signs of attention, but when asked if she is real, she answers, "If you don't distinguish, does it really matter?" Elsie is trying to figure out what really happened to Peter Abernathy. She had reviewed his programs many times and noticed that Peter was acting on his own, as if deliberately. Elsie assumes that the reason was Ford's addition to the updates and asks for permission to check Dolores again. She suggests that it may be contagious, but Bernard says that the girl was checked and cleaned. The next morning, Dolores crosses the street as usual, but this time she suddenly stops halfway. She hears a voice in her head telling her to remember something. Dolores turns and sees a street littered with corpses and debris. She's the only one alive. Then the girl hears a cough behind her. Turning around, She sees Mev and returns to reality, and suddenly Dolores bends down to her ear and utters a phrase that her father told her. Violent feelings have a violent end. Mev looks confused, and the girl, smiling, walks away. William changes into old clothes and goes out to Angelica. The final touch is a cowboy hat, and through an old-fashioned wooden door, he enters the train car. Logan appears next. He looks out the window, admiring the canyon. At this time, a small squad is going to execute the criminal Lawrence in the park. And then a man in black appears. He kills everyone except Lawrence. It becomes finally clear that the man in black is real because no one could harm him. He shows the rescued man a scalp with a pattern of a maze and demands help to find a way out, because this is the secret level of the whole game, after which he ties Lawrence to a horse and drags him along. In the salon, Maeve gives her standard welcome speech to a new guest, and suddenly memories of an Indian attack wake up in her head. She's dressed like a farmer's wife, and she has a daughter. Maeve falls into a stupor, and now she's already in the control center. She behaves in a standard way. The researchers do not understand what is wrong with her. Dr. Ford and Bernard observe the production and discuss the problems that have arisen. Bernard believes that one photo is not enough to influence Peter. Clearly there was something else, maybe sabotage. Has anyone else joined in their games? At this time, a train arrives at the park, from which Logan and William get off. They walk through the town, see a Federation soldier recruiting volunteers for the army, cowboys and ladies in vintage dresses. William is delighted. He couldn't even imagine how plausible it would be. Then William sees Dolores. She has left the shop and is packing her travel bags. When she sees her reflection in the glass, she freezes for some reason. A voice is heard asking her to turn on, and in the next frame, we see Dolores already in the center, along with Bernard. He wonders if she remembers their last conversation. The girl answers in the affirmative. Has she told anyone about him? She denies it, because he didn't tell her to. He wonders if others have noticed changes in her core. She denies it again, and then Bernard asks Dolores not to mention to anyone what they talked about, because there is something unusual about her, which personally seems amazing to him, but others may think otherwise, and tells her to turn off her protocol of events and confirm that she erased this conversation. She confirms and goes back to the park. Mev returns to the salon and once again delivers her standard speech to the next guest, and again he remembers something related to the Indians. She looks at her hand and remembers how the girl's hand was holding it. Teddy, who is sitting next to her, asks if she is all right. The technician watching her reports to Stis that her behavior is unstable again, and he orders her to transfer the role of mom to Clementine. Strangely, Maeve clearly looks upset. Ostap's orders to leave her for the last night and recall her in the morning. William and Logan are sitting at a table in the hotel restaurant. William is still not used to the hosts and asks how they can be distinguished, to which Logan pulls out a gun. But William asks to let him finish dinner. Then Logan has fun with the women, and William talks to Clementine. He says that true love is waiting for him at home. Clementine thinks about the word present and says that she understands it. At this time, Fort gets into an elevator in an underground tunnel. Then he finds himself in the desert, in an isolated part of the park, where he meets a boy of about 10 years old. They go for a walk together. From the outside, it looks like they've known each other for a long time. The man in black with Lawrence on a leash arrives in the town of Los Mudas. They sit down at a table in a Mexican cafe. Lawrence's daughter and his wife run up. The man in black tries to get Lawrence to tell him where the entrance to the maze is, but he refuses to answer. Then the man opens fire and kills the bartender, brothers, and then Lawrence's wife. And then the girl, quite calmly, looking into his eyes, says that the maze is not for him. He must go along the bed of the Red River to where the snakes nest. Lawrence asks to leave them alone, but he ties the man to the horse again and leaves the town. The girl looks after him in silence. Ford and the boy are walking in the desert. At this time, they see a rattlesnake, but Ford calms it down with one movement of his hand, and then shows a black spire sticking out at the foot of the cliff. He orders the boy to leave and never come back here. The child obediently leaves. In the lab, Elsie examines Mev. She puts the host in order and tells her to put it into operation. Mev is back in the salon. She is very successful in flirting with a guest. Elsie's adjustments have helped, and she's back in shape. Teddy and Mev are talking when one of the guests suddenly shoots the guy. Mev doesn't like it. When she gets home, she goes to bed. She has a dream in which she and her daughter are on a farm, but then a nightmare begins with an Indian attack. They run into the house. Mev grabs a gun and prepares to shoot back, but in the opened door, there is not an Indian, but a man in black. She tries to shoot him, but to no avail. Maeve tries to wake up and wakes up on the lab table. Two technicians remove staphylococcus from her peritoneum, seeing that she has regained consciousness. The guys get scared and unsuccessfully try to take control of her. Maeve grabs a scalpel and drives people away and then runs out into the corridor, holding her stomach. It turns out to be in the part of the center where damaged hosts are being restored. Behind the glass, Maeve sees Teddy dead. While she is examining it, technicians come up from behind and disable her with an injection. They have to hide the fact of her escape. At night, Dolores wakes up in her bed. She leaves the house, goes into the yard, and, kneeling down, digs a gun out of the ground. The center is hosting a presentation of a new story, An Odyssey on the Red River. When Sizemore finishes the story, there is applause. But Ford says he doesn't see the point in all this, and Lee is criticized. Ford says that the guests are not coming here for bad taste. They want to get a plot in which they will see themselves in a new role. Hearing Ford's voice, the viewer sees William pick up the fallen jar and hand it to Dolores, and the girl's face looks like she was hoping to see someone else. And Ford shows Bernard the Black Spires, says that this will be a new storyline that both the management and, most importantly, the guest will definitely like. Dolores is in a room with glass walls. She is dressed, which usually does not happen during inspections. A man enters, outwardly a copy of Bernard, but he is dressed in a black lab coat, and he is not wearing a tie, which Bernard never allows. Dolores says she didn't tell anyone about their conversations. The man brought her the book Alice in Wonderland. Dolores sums it up thoughtfully. The book talks about changes and wonders who she is. On Sweetwater Street, Clementine tries to lure William, and then the bandit Horace starts shooting, hiding behind Clementine. William shoots him. Logan is pleased that his friend was able to kill the host after all. William says he's going on a bounty hunt with Holden. Elsie informs Bernard that before killing the 6 hosts, William spoke to someone named Arnold. She is informed about the lost host. Bernard asks to find and return the missing person. Elsie and Stubbs are going upstairs. Teddy is accompanied by a guest named Marty. The woman is belligerent. They kill Samuel's bully and go to the salon. Teddy gives Maeve a few coins, and she suddenly remembers his body waiting to be restored. Teddy sees Dolores and comes out to meet her as always to pick up the tin can that fell out of her and say his usual text. On the way to the ranch, they stop to talk, but unlike other conversations, Dolores asks Teddy to take her somewhere far away. The man is puzzled. She went beyond the script. He says that in the beginning he needs to finish everything. They drive to the ranch and hears gunshots again. Teddy runs to the house, Dolores after him. Gunshots and women's screams are heard. Ford examines Teddy and is interested in his aspirations. He says he wants to live with Dolores, but Ford says that the girl's role is to be found by guests and have fun with her. And then Ford updates Teddy's story. He remembers Uyet, who was his sergeant and friend, and now he is the embodiment of absolute evil. Teddy and Dolores drive to the ranch, and the guy tries to teach the girl to shoot, but she can't pull the trigger. Marty and the sheriff arrive. It's time to go after Vite. After all, Teddy was able to stay alive so much after meeting this fiend of hell. Teddy leaves, having previously promised Dolores to return. Elsie and Stubbs approach a group of hosts sitting by an extinct campfire. They can't chop wood because the one who is allowed to use the axe has disappeared. In the logger's tent, they find figures carved out of wood. Elsie notices the same strange pattern on each of them. She takes herself alone. Teddy tells the hunters who Void is. According to him, after his incomprehensible disappearance, he will return to the army with some strange ideas. The squad finds several mutilated bodies tied to trees. Shots are fired, and people are hiding. Marty is excited. The second guest is scared. He demands to be taken to the city. Teddy and Marty cover their departure. Elsie and Stubbs continue to search for the host. Elsie looks at the carving on the way, and Stubbs tells her that it looks like the constellation Orion. Elsie is puzzled. Bernard comes to Ford. He is concerned that the hosts are not just reproducing previous builds, they are talking to the same imaginary person, Arnold. Ford says that he lived in the park with his partner for 3 years. They tried to bring the hosts to perfection, but Arnold had little external similarity. He sought to create consciousness, which in his opinion was a pyramid where memory was at the lowest level, followed by improvisation and personal gain, and what was at the very top it was not possible to understand. Arnold's death was considered an accident, but Ford considers it suicide, and then asks Bernard not to repeat Arnold's mistakes. The machines are not real, and they have no consciousness. Elsie accidentally stumbles upon a host stuck in a crevice. After a shootout, Teddy is captured by Ayat. Again, the conversation of the man, Bernard's double, with Dolores. He says he was wrong, and it would be better if he returned her to her former form, but suggests that there are two versions of her, the one that feels everything and asks questions, and the one that is safe. What does she want to be? The girl is confused. A man tells how he learned to swim. You need to be able to let children go. It is the duty of parents. He won't roll it back, and she won't say anything to anyone, and will keep the plot. Dolores is going to the ranch. Everything is the same as always, only she is now without Teddy. She finds her murdered father again, and suddenly remembers that she has already seen this picture. Rebus drags her into the barn. Falling on the hay, the girl discovers a gun and points it at the bandit. Looking at Rebus, Dolores imagines him in the place of the man in black. A voice tells me to kill him. Dolores shoots. Running outside, she hears her mother's scream, and then the guest shoots her in the stomach. Dolores looks at the wound, and suddenly time seems to roll back. She sees the guest again and hears a shot, but this time she was not hit. The girl jumps on the horse and gallops away. Stis asks Elsie to put the host into sleep mode because they only need his head for analysis. He pulls out a knife and tries to saw off the host's head, but he suddenly regains consciousness and jumps up. He picks up a huge rock and swings at Elsa, but instead of bringing him down on the fire escape, he smashes his own head, thereby destroying himself. Logan and William are sitting by the fire. Dolores rides out of the darkness and falls into William's arms. Another meeting of Dolores with Bernard's double. The girl emotionally talks about the death of her parents. The man is surprised. This is an unplanned reaction. He offers to find her the center of the maze, and then she will be free. Dolores wakes up on the ground next to William, a gun in her hand. At this time, Maeve is chatting with Clementine and suddenly sees her and herself killed on the floor. And then a park worker in a protective suit bends over her. When she comes to, she draws what she saw. Hiding the sketch, Maeve finds several more of the same drawings. Elsie warns Bernard that the abnormal behavior of the hosts is not just a failure, but he states that she is just making it up. The man in black came to Bloody Creek and found nothing there. Lawrence tries to convince him to stop searching for the maze, but then they see Armistice bathing in the river. The snake tattoo on her body convinces that this is the clue given by Lawrence's daughter. They join her squad. Dolores is in the village where Lawrence's family was shot and sees his daughter sitting by the fountain. They talk, and suddenly visions of the white church pop up in Dolores' head, and then she sees on the ground a diagram of a maze drawn by a girl. Flashbacks again show the church, her with a gun in front of the grave. The girl comes to her senses. The girls, as well as the pattern of the maze, are not. William informs that he is going to hunt a bandit named Slim. Dolores goes with him. At night they talk. He is surprised by her behavior because she has to fulfill a certain scenario, and she says that she has to find her way. It seems to her as if something is calling her to some place designed specifically for her. Lawrence tells the man in black that Armistice is planning to release someone from prison, and then he offers to go there himself and solve the problem. In return, he asks to tell about her tattoo. Armistice agrees to the deal. The man in black goes to work with Lawrence. At the prison gates, the marshal chastises Rowe for not recognizing a particularly dangerous criminal, Lawrence, and orders him to be shot. The man in black is sent to a cell where he discovers Hector and suggests that he escape. It turns out that his cigar contains a small explosive charge with which he opens the camera. The man in black and Hector shoot the marshal's team, again saving Lawrence's life. They arrive Armistice, and she tells the story of the tattoo. Once her village was attacked by people in Ayata. They killed everyone except her, and since then, her tattoo has been stained with the blood of every bandit from the villain's gang that she manages to kill. A crowd of Indians is coming through Sweet Water. The girl drops a doll that looks very much like a park worker in a protective suit. Maeve tries to find out what it is, but she is told that it is part of their incomprehensible beliefs. Teresa goes to meet Ford, who, in her opinion, creates chaos in the park. They see a huge excavator digging the ground for its new storyline. Ford invites her to a restaurant and there tells her that the world of the Wild West was originally conceived as a park with a perfect balance, but Arnold disliked people preferring the company of hosts, and begged him not to let rich people in there. The park for Ford is not a business project, but a whole world in which every detail is designed. At these words, the doctor stops the hosts to illustrate. Here they and their partner are gods, and the rest are just guests. Ford is practically threatening Teresa. He says he knows everything about her, so he asks her not to interfere. With a wave of his hand, Ford launches the hosts. The table is shaking, and people see an excavator coming at them, which is digging up an agave plantation. Teresa is worried. At this time, Holden, Logan, and William break into the house where Slim's people are having fun. After killing everyone but him, they go to town. The man in black and Lawrence follow Wyatt's trail and find a bloodied Teddy tied to a tree. Slim tells Holden that they will get a lot more if they take him to El Laz. Upon hearing this, Logan kills the hunter because this offer is very profitable. An angry William asks why Logan has turned into an evil freak here in the park, but Logan laughs it's just a game and orders Slim to take them to the hole. The streets of Sweetwater, again, a cavalcade of bandits with their faces covered, again an army man with a bunch of weapons, and shooting at others. But this time Maeve is waiting for Hector. She presents the gun to his head and leads him upstairs to the safe. She shows him her drawing and promises to name a combination of numbers if he tells her what it is. Hector tells Maeve that the figure is a shadow that the Indians believe in. They believe that the shadows come from hell to watch over our world. Maeve assures me that she was definitely wounded in the stomach, and she definitely saw these figures. The woman asks him to punch her in the stomach and see what's there. He refuses, but Maeve cuts herself and pulls out a bullet. Having lost her head, Maeve begins passionately kissing Hector, while Sheriford and his men shoot through the door. Dr. Ford is talking to his old host. He talks about the dog that his father bought for him and his brother. This greyhound was written off from the races, where it chased a piece of felt that looked like a rabbit. The boys brought the dog to the park and let it off the leash. The dog noticed the cat, rushed after it, caught and tore it up, and then sat down in complete confusion. Having finally caught this thing, she just didn't know what to do next. Dolores is standing in the middle of a field with grave crosses. The voice of Find Me sounds in her head, and she asks, "Show me how." Logan's voice brings her out of this state. He points to Pariah, a city of exiles, criminals, thieves, and murderers. Logan informs William that the company they both work for is considering acquiring the park. On the street, they meet a detachment of the Army of New Virginia. Dolores' father said that these were former soldiers who refused to capitulate and are now moonlighting as mercenaries. Logan assumes that the war continues to go somewhere in the far corners of the park, where he has not yet reached. The man in black is trying to revive Teddy. He expects the guy to lead him to Wyatt. A man in black pours water out of a winneskin and puts it under a tree, and then he cuts Lawrence's throat and hangs him upside down. He collects blood in a winneskin, intending to use it to put Teddy in order. Two surgeons are working with Maeve's body. One of them is interested in the incision on his stomach. He understands that she was looking for something. Left alone, the man hides a controlled tablet and a dead bird in the closet. Teddy comes to his senses. Lawrence's blood has done him good, and the man in black complains that hosts used to be more interesting. There were details inside. They are a red mess, so similar to blood, and then he reports that Dolores is in Wyatt's hands. Hearing this, Teddy stands up. Night falls on Pariah. Dolores walks with William. They discuss issues related to life paths and choices. William says that in the park, you can be anyone, completely different from who you are in the real world. Dolores is confused. What does the real world mean? William believes that androids should not notice such things. Dolores objects. The world calls her, and this did not happen before. A procession begins on the street. Logan reports that El Lazo has agreed to meet with them tomorrow. Suddenly Dolores sees in the crowd myself. She tries to catch up with the illusion, but hears a voice in her head and falls asleep. The girl wakes up in the laboratory. Dr. Ford is in front of her. He asks her standard questions, and then suddenly asks if she remembers his former self. She says she can be forgetful sometimes. Ford says she should definitely remember Arnold, the man who created her, but she says she doesn't remember anyone with that name. He asks when she had the last contact with Arnold. Her answer is 34 years, 42 days, and 7 hours ago, the day Arnold died. And then she remembers that the last time they met, Arnold told her that she would help him destroy this place. Dolores asks if they were old friends, but Ford denies it and leaves, leaving her in the dark. She suddenly says, "He doesn't know. I haven't told him anything." In the lab, Felix tries to revive the host bird. Sylvester swears he stole corporate property, and in general, a body is waiting for them. He rolls in the gurney with Mav. Felix is stunned. He had recently repaired it. Sylvester starts pulling bullets out of fresh wounds, while Felix continues to be confused. The next day, Dolores, William, Logan, and Slim go to meet El Lazo. The man sitting at the table raises his head, and the viewer sees that it is Lawrence. Logan asks to introduce him to the Confederados, but he puts forward conditions. They will seize a convoy with nitroglycerin, which the feds are carrying, and then he will fulfill their request. The company ambushes the feds' wagon. Despite the certainty that no one will be hurt, a shootout ensues. Soldiers and Slim are killed. Nitroglycerin is delivered to El Lazo, but he is in no hurry to hand it over to the Confederados. El Lazo offers to celebrate this event. Satisfied with the offer, the men go to a brothel. Elsie makes her way to the body of the lumberjack. She feels some kind of trick in the fact that this investigation was taken away from her. After examining the host, she finds a satellite data upload link in his hand. Elsie shows the found ones to Bernard. She adds that he was right. The host did not draw the stars, but the goal. Someone used an android to steal data from the park. While the others are having fun, the Confederados commander tries to convince William and Logan to join their war, but William refuses. Logan tells William that everything he has achieved in life is a fiction. He was appointed executive vice president only because Logan was sure that he would never turn into a threat and would always remain a passive puppet. And his sister thinks the same. Furious, William pushes Logan against the wall, but then lets go. He's depressed, and then he notices that Dolores has disappeared. The girl goes to the brothel, trying not to look at the obscenity that is happening. In front of her, she sees a red curtain. Behind it, the fortune teller's room. Dolores sits down in front of her and pulls out a map of Thoreau with a picture of the maze. Looking up at the woman again, she sees herself instead, but only in a blue dress. The doppelganger says that she should go to the maze, and says that she sees clearly. Looking at her hand, Dolores sees a hair in it. Pulling on it, the girl sees a deep wound forming on her arm. In fright, she jumps up, and it turns out that there is none of this. Running out of the room, she finds herself in the kitchen, where they see El Lazo pouring nitroglycerin into Slim's corpse, and instead they pour tequila in a bottle. She finds William, and tells him that El Lazo has been deceiving them all this time. On the street, a Confederate juggles a bottle, as they think, with nitroglycerin. Suddenly she falls, and everyone understands that this is a hoax. Dolores kisses William, and they try to escape. The Confederados unleash all their anger on Logan. Logan asks for help, but William refuses him and runs away with Dolores. They are surrounded by soldiers in the alley. William shouts for Dolores to run away, but instead she pulls out her revolver and shoots everyone on the spot. William is surprised, and Dolores says that she has decided to stop being a young lady in trouble. They escape from Pariah and catch up with the train. Climbing into the car, Dolores and William find El Lazo in the middle of the coffins, with a gun in his hands. Knowing that the corpses in the coffins are filled with explosives, Dolores points her gun at one of them. El Lazo raises his hands, and William takes the gun from him. El Lazo appears to them as a new name, Lawrence, and offers to get comfortable. The way to the front is not close. Dolores sees a pattern of a maze on the lid of the coffin, and quietly says that she is already on her way. The man in black and Teddy are sitting in a bar. Dr. Ford approaches them. The man in black seems very surprised by this and calls it a rare honor. Teddy says that the man in black is looking for Ayat because he took his daughter. Ford is surprised, and the man in black says that he has always believed that there is not enough of a real villain in the park, hence his modest contribution. And then he asks if Wyatt is a simple host that guests are hunting, or has Dr. Ford finally made him a worthy opponent who will prevent him from finding the center of the maze. Ford asks what he hopes to find there. The man in black says that he believes that there is a deeper meaning in the park, some kind of truly laid down by the Creator. Ford replies that it's enough to just ask about it, but the interlocutor laughs. For this he will need a shovel, because the person who needs to be asked died 35 years ago, and almost took this place with him, and he wonders what he can find if he opens the doctor. But before he can pull out the knife, Teddy grabs the blade with his bare hand. Ford says he doesn't want to interfere with finding the path of self-knowledge, and returns the knife. At night, Felix returns to his workplace to work with the bird. The sparrow wakes up and starts flying around the room. A satisfied repairman watches the bird and, turning around, discovers the source of the noise. Mav is sitting on a gurney, and a bird is sitting on her finger. "Hello, Felix. It's time for us to chat," she says, smiling at the bird. Maeve wakes up and goes to work. At the bar, she takes one guest upstairs with her. Once in her room, the woman begins to insult him, forcing him to kill her by strangulation. When she regains consciousness on a gurney in the center, she smiles, realizing that she has returned to the laboratory, exactly where she intended to go. Bernard examines the laser satellite communications transmissions from the lumberjack's body brought to him by Elsie. She admits that in the beginning she suspected Bernard, but he has been here for too long. Now it's clear for sure. Hosts are used for industrial espionage. Bernard clarifies that the logger is an old model, and in order to study it in more detail, you need to go down into the forbidden zone. At the sublevel, it turns on old equipment, logs into the system, and looks for anomalies, and almost immediately finds a logger and other hosts missing from the new system in Sector 17. Dr. Ford arrives in Los Matos with a group of builders, one of whom informs that the town must be destroyed in order to make way for a new canyon. Ford is against it. He lets the builders go, and then notices the image of the maze carved on the table at the inn. Back in his office, Ford takes out and carefully examines an old notebook with drawings of early hosts and the maze. Teddy tells the man in black a local myth about a man who was killed and then resurrected, and alive for the last time. He attacked his tormentors in an indescribable rage, and then he built a house and surrounded it with a maze, the way in which only he knows. Oncoming travelers inform the men about the riots in the pair, so the road through it is closed. Determined to find Dolores, Teddy declares that he knows another way to get to the border. Felix convinces Maeve that she is designed and built, and her every response is programmed. He says he's human, and she asks, "How do you know?" And then Felix shows her the display of the algorithm of their dialogue on the tablet. She shuts down from overwork. Rebooting, she convinces Felix to take her upstairs. Maeve sees how people and animals are created as hosts. Climbing the stairs, they enter the design laboratory, where the sculptor creates a new face and head. Before leaving, Maeve sees a presentation about the park, and in it herself and a little girl. Recognizing her dreams, Felix tells her about the builds and the change of roles. The girl was present in her old narrative, and she has been in the saloon for not 10 years, as she believes, but only 1 year. Sylvester appears and says that he will report Felix. Maeve threatens him with a scalpel. She shocks him by knowing not only his name, but also his dirty desires at her expense. During the teleconference, Teresa receives instructions about the inadmissibility of delays. She replies that she will do everything. Lee Sizemore is sunbathing in a bar. Teresa tells him about the damage Ford is doing with his new storylines. She wants Lee to go back to work and fix everything. The man in black is unhappy that there are too many Federation soldiers on the pass leading to the old territories. Disguised in military uniforms, they infiltrate a military camp that was destroyed by White. One of the soldiers recognizes Teddy, and they are captured. In a bar, Sizemore is hitting on Charlotte Hale and boasts that he is the author of all the plots in the park. He blurts out that robots are capable of breaking the script. Elsie informs Bernard that she has made serious progress in the investigation and hopes for a reward in the form of a new position. Alarmed, Bernard goes to the control room and asks the technician for the results of an earlier request. She claims that Sector 17 is completely empty, as it is reserved for future expansion. Then he decides to visit the sector and discovers a cottage and a family in it. Bernard recognizes the man with the photo that Ford showed him and asks, "Are you Arnold?" The man is belligerent. He tries to expose Bernard, completely unresponsive to voice commands. Ford suddenly appears and stops the host. He explains that this is a first-generation host and demonstrates to Bernard that the boy is an old electromechanical model. He supports them himself because Arnold created a cottage and hosts for him as a gift based on Ford's childhood description, and is advised to create a host for his deceased son, Charlie. Bernard leaves. Later, he receives information about 82 first-generation hosts, 47 of which were created by Arnold. Dolores Abernathy is listed second on this list. In the camp, the man in black and Teddy are tied to the wheels of wagons and heated in the fire of brands in the form of a maze. Teddy has a vision of the carnage he and White have staged, and then he breaks free, rushes to the Gatling machine gun mounted on the cart, and shoots all the soldiers in the camp. The man in black is amazed. They continue on their way. Elsie informs Bernard that she has managed to determine that the cars are controlled by a voice that is located in an abandoned park building, and she goes there to check who had access to it. Lowe asks her to be careful, but she's already hung up. Elsie discovers a receiving transmitter in an abandoned theater. The last person to use it was Teresa. Elsie calls Bernard, who is at Teresa's at the time, and informs him that his mistress is behind everything. There is a sound, and someone's hands grab her. Maeve blackmails Felix and Sylvester into renewing her personal qualities and increasing her self-awareness. While Bernard Lowe is reading Alice in Wonderland to his son in the hospital, Charlie is dying. Bernard wakes up from a nightmare. Arriving at work, Bernard tests Hector and brings him back into service. He tries to contact Celsi, but the technician says she has taken a vacation. On the train, William is playing cards with Lazu, and Dolores notices heads on spikes placed along the tracks. The bandit explains that they are now in the territory of the Ghost Nation. Hale announces to Terezi that the council is going to remove Ford, and therefore they need to show his incompetence by demonstrating the danger of hosts to people. The pumped-up Maeve constantly catches herself thinking that she has already lived some moments. Suddenly, all hosts except Maeve freeze. A cleaning crew enters the salon. A frightened Maeve grabs a knife. However, they take Clementine away, completely ignoring her. Dolores tells William that she doesn't want to go back to her old life, and he admits that he is looking for the meaning of his existence in the park. He talks about his fiancée. Agitated, Dolores leaves the car. William catches up and kisses her, and potential actions take place between them. Teresa and Charlotte, in the presence of all department heads, present a presentation that demonstrates the threat Clementine poses. After her update with Ford's dreams, the participant of the presentation, whom Clementine considers a person, begins to beat her. A woman is begging for help from people on the other side of the glass wall. Finally, the torturer freezes, and Clementine's memory is erased. The fight starts again, but now the host remembers his opponent's previous actions and beats him up. Stubbs uses standard voice commands in hopes of stopping Clementine, but she doesn't react. He shoots her in the chest. Teresa comments on the problem. Hosts actively react to the insults they have experienced in the past, although they should not remember them. Bernard takes all the blame for Ford's code on himself and is fired. Ford remains silent. The next morning, William tells Dolores that he doesn't regret last night at all, and she shows him her new sketch, the place where the mountains meet the sea. The train stops, and El Laza sees that they are surrounded by Confederados. They open fire with a machine gun. A man on a horse with a white flag jumps out of the car, but in fact, it is Slim's corpse, filled with nitroglycerin, which explodes from El Lazo's shot. The trio rides into the territory of the Ghost Nation. The Confederados pursuing them stumble upon the enraged warriors. When the danger has passed, Dolores shows William the landscape that she saw in her dreams. Tired of the couple's fights, she decides to part with Lazo. Meef once again comes to his senses during recovery. Felix says that someone will guess something if she comes here so often. She wants to know where Clementine is. He leads Maeve upstairs, where they see Sylvester lobotomizing the host. Bernard informs Teresa that he is aware of her betrayal and switches to the main problem. Hosts are on the verge of gaining consciousness. Stating that he needs to show her something, Bernard invites her into the elevator. Sylvester makes excuses to Maeve, but she announces that she is leaving here and they will help her. Bernard takes Teresa to a country cottage in the 17th sector. She is surprised. This place is not on any map. Opening an inconspicuous door, they go to the remote diagnostics center, which has been mothballed for a long time, and find there a drawing that resembles Bernard. Ford appears in the lab and confirms that Bernard is the host. Lowe is in shock. Ford tells Teresa that he is the master of this world, and she was lured into a trap. Teresa tries to call for help, but her mobile phone does not find a cellular connection. He orders Bernard to kill Teresa. Bernard takes off his jacket and tie and hits the woman. Then he puts on his jacket and ties his tie again. Ford says they have a lot of work ahead of them. Teresa's corpse remains lying in the dark. Ford asks Bernard to turn on. He begins to sob, remembering what he did to Teresa. Ford is amazed at this outburst of emotions and says that Teresa and her associates would have destroyed Bernard and all his work. Enraged, Bernard refuses to help. Jumping up and throwing his chair to the side, he advances on Ford, who stops him and declares that Arnold experienced the same thing. And then she tells him to erase all evidence of a connection between them and Teresa's death. When he's done, Ford will release him from the painful memories. Lowe deletes all the videos with Teresa and burns all the notes from her in the crematorium oven. In the salon, Maeve hears Clementine's phrase, but it's her new host Clem who comes over to chat with Maeve, pronouncing the standard text that Clementine spoke. After finishing his glass, Maeve remembers himself next to his daughter again. And again he finds himself in the center, where he tells the repairman that he no longer understands at all what is really real, and repeats that he is going to leave the park. Lutz objects. She knows nothing about the outside world, but Sylvester supports her. Maeve understands that he just wants to get rid of her, because there are explosives in the spines of the hosts, which destroys them when they try to escape. On the banks of the river, Dolores and William come across the corpses of the Confederados killed by the wars of the ghost people. A mortally wounded soldier says that his squad attacked the train because someone in the pair ordered to kill everyone who is in it. William understands this is Logan's doing. Dolores goes down to the river to fill a canteen and hears the voice of "Find me," and then sees herself floating face down in the river. The hallucination passes. She returns with water, but the soldier has already died. Teresa's body is being examined. Ford claims that the recent demonstration of aggressiveness of the hosts was rigged because the technician changed the code of Clementine. Therefore, it is necessary to restrict the access of technicians until more reliable personnel is selected, and Bernard is reinstated as head of the Behavior and Diagnostics Laboratory. While Maeve is studying the tablet, Sylvester appears and announces that there is a commotion upstairs. She hands the tablet to Felix and asks who Arnold is, and demands to be taken to the behaviorists. Sylvester suggests Felix erase it completely. Teddy and the man in black continue to search for White. Soon they come across a lot of corpses. One is still alive. Angela confirms that everyone was killed by White's men. At this time, a man in black is attacked by a tall masked figure with horns and an axe in his hands. The men try to shoot him, but they fail because ordinary bullets do not work. The man in black manages to throw a rope around his neck, and this picture reminds Teddy of what happened in the past when he strangled Dolores and dragged her to the barn at the Abernath Ranch. Entering the fight, Teddy kills the horned opponent with an axe and then beats the man in black. The technicians take Maeve to the behavior lab, where she chooses the settings she needs on the screen and then lays down on her back, allowing Felix to turn herself off. Felix forces himself to press the reformat button with difficulty. Charlotte interrupts Sizemore from programming the cannibal's new host. She informs him that Teresa died while performing an important task for the company, and offers to work on something secret for her. The repairmen are standing over Maeve's body, whose identity has now been erased, but Maeve suddenly opens her eyes. Felix did exactly what she asked. He couldn't just destroy life. Jumping up, she grabs a scalpel and cuts Sylvester's throat. Felix is terrified. Maeve said she wouldn't hurt anyone. She calmly replies that it's very treacherous and says it's time to assemble her army. The next day, Maeve wakes up at home as usual, but there are some differences. The piano melody has become different, and Maeve has become more attentive to what surrounds her. The bartender reports that her debt is too high, but Maeve inspires him to the contrary. The host looks at her blankly, then agrees, and offers a drink at his expense. Maeve realizes that she can now manipulate other hosts. Soon, she hears the echoes of the arrival of Hector and his gang in the city. While the bandits are playing out their scenario, Maeve comes out to meet them. She changes the script on the go, sending the characters to other places, and triumphs. Ford is preparing to erase Bernard's memory. He admires Bernard's unique position, a programmer who knows how a machine works, and a machine that understands its essence. His story is needed to make him feel alive. Bernard asks what is the difference between them, and Ford says there is no difference. And that ruined Arnold. Bernard asks if the doctor forced him to harm someone else. Ford denies it, but Bernard sees Elsie dying in his arms. Meanwhile, Dolores and William arrive at the place where the girl was so eager. She sees an empty town that is suddenly filled with hosts, including Maeve and Armistice. They are trained to dance and behave properly. Lawrence's daughter approaches her, asking if she has found what she was looking for. Suddenly there is a scream, and Dolores sees the townspeople falling under the shots. She sees herself shooting people. Then this second, Dolores presents a gun to her temple. William grabs the gun from her. Returning to reality, Dolores sees only a vacant lot with a church spire sticking out. He doesn't understand what's happening to her. Having become hysterical, Dolores says that she no longer understands what is really real, and Arnold wants her to remember. William says he needs to go home. At night, they are surrounded by a number of Confederados under Logan's command. Charlotte, are sent to the vault, where the woman chooses the disabled Peter Abernathy, whom she assumes to use as a vault for the kidnapped Teresa and the code. She tells Lee to write a story for him and create a convincing personality so that he can leave the park. She doesn't even realize that he was decommissioned due to unpredictable and dangerous behavior. Having met Bernard in the corridor, Stubbs expresses his sympathy to him. He knew about their relationship with Teresa, but he denies everything. He respected Teresa as a colleague, but he didn't know her very well in life. Stubbs is at a loss. When he comes to, the man in black tells Teddy about himself. He was rich and successful in the real world, had a daughter, and lived with his wife for 30 years. However, his wife committed suicide, which his daughter blamed on him, saying that they had lived in fear of his terrible essence for decades. He came to the park to check himself, and here he found an ordinary farmer and her daughter. During the story, there is a picture with Maeve. She drinks a glass and leaves the saloon in the care of the new Clem, stating that she is leaving. Shots are fired, and Maeve suddenly has a flashback to the attack of the man in black. He killed her and her daughter to see how he would feel. And when the man thought that was all, the woman refused to die. She pulled a knife out of her stomach and tried to cut his throat. Returning to reality, Maeve sees the new Clementine, who she accidentally stabbed with the same knife, grabbing her bleeding throat and falling to the ground. The man in black felt nothing from the murder. He watched Maeve, carrying her daughter out of the house, fall into the field in the very center of the spiral furrow. And then something appeared to him that he had never seen before. Right before her death, she seemed really alive. Then the maze opened up to him, and he realized that it was impossible to kill him in Ford's game. But in Arnold's game, everything is serious. The audience looks at Maeve in shock, and she rushes to run. On the way, she whispers something to one host, changing the plot again, and he starts shooting, sowing panic. Maeve hides in her room and remembers how Ford and Bernard tried at the beginning just to delete the memories of her daughter. And when it didn't work, Ford takes away her suffering. Ford clears her memory and puts her to sleep. However, Maeve jumps up and, grabbing a scalpel from the tray, cuts her throat. In reality, employees of the cleaning team appear to take her back to the center. After hearing the story of the man in black, Angela tells Teddy to kill him. However, Teddy can't, and then she wounds Teddy in the shoulder with an arrow, confessing that she is White's man. Other masked figures appear out of the darkness. Bernard discovers major changes to Maeve's code. She forbids telling Dr. Ford about it, and reminds me he is also a host. Maeve sympathizes with him. It's hard to realize that your life is someone's invention, and yet the hosts are stronger and smarter than humans, so she will return to the park. William and Dolores are captured by Logan. The man asks to let Dolores go. She is special because she remembers the past. Logan is at a loss. William decided to take her with him, and she asks, if the outside world is so good, why do they come back here? Bernard meets with Ford in the cold storage. He wants to remember all of his past. He is sure it was created by Arnold, who was clearly preparing something different for the hosts, and Ford could have killed him for it. Bernard gives Clementine a gun, because after her consciousness was cleared, her basic code was preserved. Bernard begins to remember, first the death of his son, and then sees how he killed Teresa and Elsie. Logan is outraged that William has forgotten about his sister, and gives him her picture. To prove that Dolores is a machine, he cuts open her stomach with a knife and demonstrates the mechanical insides. Dolores pulls out a knife and cuts Logan's face, then shoots the soldiers. William asks her to run. While running away, she hears a voice that tells her to remember, and suddenly Dolores realizes that no one is chasing her anymore, and there is no wound on her stomach anymore. Hector's gang is trying to open the safe. Maeve appears from the bushes with a gun in her hands. She declares that she knows his past and future. Soon, when the contents of the safe are divided, a quarrel will break out, Hector will be killed, and this situation will repeat itself again and again. Hector hurries to the camp. As Maeve predicted, the bandits are killing each other. Only Armistice remains alive. She points the gun at Hector, but Maeve kills her. She opens the safe, and Hector sees that it is empty. He realizes the meaninglessness of the environment in a series of the same events. Handing him the knife, Maeve says that he can kill her right now, but then he will wake up again, and the safe will still be empty. They kiss, and Maeve knocks over the lantern, igniting a flame that should kill them both, returning them back to the center. Logan frees William, urging him to finally understand that everything here is not real, and there are only robots around. William agrees. The man in black watches as Angela revives Teddy. He thinks about Bonnie again in Escalante. Angela suggests Teddy to remember how it really happened. And now Teddy remembers that he didn't kill Federation soldiers, but citizens. And he himself has a sheriff's badge on his lapel. Angela promises that Teddy will one day help White in the city again with sand, and then kills him with a knife. The man in black tells Angela that he has already been to the city covered with sand, and that the maze leads him in a circle. Angela reminds him that the maze is not for him. Approaching the bound man in black, Angela offers him to try one of the games, after which she hits his head with a boulder, knocking him unconscious. Upon regaining consciousness, the man in black discovers that a rope is tightened around his neck, thrown over a tree branch, and tied to a freely grazing horse. Pulling the knife out of Teddy's chest, he manages to cut the rope at the last moment when the horse starts to gallop. Charlotte Hale appears and asks if he will help fire Ford. The man in black replies that he is only interested in the plot of the game. Stubbs is informed of a signal from the missing Elsie, which is moving through Sector 20. He decides to go there personally and gets attacked by the warriors of the Ghost Nation. They don't respond to his voice commands. When Logan wakes up in the morning, he discovers that William has killed all the Confederados. William presents the legs to his throat and says that he will be in charge now, and Logan will never call him Billy again. Dolores returns to the city of her memory, enters the white church, and takes the elevator down to the abandoned laboratory. Ford's voice says that they have created hosts in their own image and likeness. They gave all the cars a story. Bernard got a tragedy. He demands to return him to the very beginning. He must meet with Arnold. But the doctor refuses. He created it. Ford. Dolores at this time goes into the room and sits down on a chair. Bernard loses his son again, but now he can command, and orders his son to wake up and says that Charlie is just a lie. He should let him go. His son asks him to open his eyes, and it turns out that this command came from Ford. He greets an old friend host with the appearance of Arnold, but his name is now Bernard, and he is the perfect partner. A man comes down to Dolores in the basement. She recognizes Arnold. He had once promised that the maze would bring her joy, but it turned out to be a deception. He asks to remember why he can't help, and the girl remembers he's dead, and she killed him. Stunned by this discovery, Dolores returns to the church and freezes in front of the front door, through which a man in black enters. Returning to the present, Bernard, outraged by Ford's manipulations and treachery, orders Clementine to shoot him, but she lowers the gun, and then Bernard realizes that Ford has built in a secret security code, and all this has already happened. Ford begins to tell. Now Bernard will take a gun and shoot himself in the head. As Ford leaves the vault, a flash of gunfire and a falling Bernard are seen in the background. Dolores is in the process of being assembled. Arnold's voice congratulates her on her arrival in the world, and here she is shaving a man in black with a knife. He says they've been here before. It's just that the city was covered with sand. Dolores tells him about Arnold, who created a maze game for her, then throws the knife and leaves. The man in black follows her. William drags Logan on a rope behind his horse. Lawrence's camp is ahead. His men are pointing their weapons at them, but William doesn't seem to mind. Lawrence says he was confident of his return. Teddy, as always, comes by train to Sweetwater. As usual, it faces the main street, and suddenly he hears a voice. Remember, a massacre that once took place here appears before him. Dolores walks among the dead bodies, and a wolf runs through. Returning to his reality, he shoots at the brute instead of touching his hat, following on, and then jumps back on the train. Dolores, in a shirt and trousers, is heading to the white church. When she enters the church, she is wearing her blue dress. She tells Arnold, who is sitting on the bench, that she has finally figured out the location of his labyrinth for herself. They come out of the church, and there she is again in a shirt and trousers, and she is accompanied by a man in black. Dolores kneels down in front of the cross and wipes the dust from her name written on it, and then digs out a wooden box from its foot. Arnold praises her and says that when he started working on her mind, he could not understand why she was not moving forward. But then he realized that consciousness is not a pyramid, but a maze, which means he needs to tell Ford that the park cannot be opened, because the hosts are alive here. Dolores is back in her shirt and trousers. The man in black snatches the maze puzzle from her. He gets angry and demands explanations that she doesn't have. Dolores sees herself in her blue dress, sitting opposite Arnold. He says Robert doesn't believe Dolores has regained consciousness and wants Arnold to roll her away. He is convinced that the park will turn into a real hell for any conscious host. Arnold asks her to kill all the hosts. They must destroy the world of the Wild West. The man in black continues to ask about the maze, but Dolores can't remember anything else. He threatens her, asking where White is, and beats her. Looking up, Dolores sees herself with a gun on the street in Escalante. Gunshots and screams are heard. Teddy kills hosts. Shocked, he tells Dolores that something has gone wrong. How could he kill so many innocent people? Returning to his reality, he hears the voice of the man in black. He bought this world, and he owns a controlling stake. His business is thriving because this world looks real and real. But the hosts are not able to resist, and the guests never lose. He asks Dolores if she wants to change it, if she wants the real thing. She replies that her real one is the one who loves her, and he will kill the man in black. William and Lawrence are looking at a military camp from a hill. Lawrence says that they know where to look for his woman here, and he is ready to help with this. Logan, still bound, grins at hearing this. William slaps him across the face and pulls him to his feet. Lee Sizemore informs Charlotte that Peter Abernathy is prepared and offers himself in Ford's place. Charlotte promises him complete freedom of action. The announcer's voice greets the incoming board. Having disrupted the process of assembling the host skeleton, Sylvester takes out the sixth vertebra with a charge from the spine, replaces it with another one, and takes it with him. Mev is being restored after a fire in which she died along with Hector. Opening her eyes, she sees Felix next to her. Taking the tablet from him, she disables the park's security system and modifies Hector and Armistice. Hale informs Ford that the board voted unanimously for his resignation. He is due to announce his resignation today. Hosts will now become easier, and she is not at all worried that he can destroy anything before he leaves. Ford politely says goodbye to her. The technician applies a tattoo pattern to Armistice's skin. Another technician takes Hector to the next compartment. He listens to music through headphones, so he doesn't hear how the host wakes up and attacks his repairman. When he finally sees what's going on, he frantically tries to take control of the voice control. At this moment, Hector strikes from behind. The picture of the massacre horrifies Sylvester. He tells Maeve that her main code has been revised by a certain Arnold, but he doesn't know who it is. Teddy jumps off the train. After shooting the soldier, he takes his horse and gallops away. Dolores tries to crawl away from the man in black. She is sure that William will definitely come to save her. Mocking her, the man in black says that he once knew a guest named William, who gradually developed a taste for murder. At first, he didn't know how to fight at all, but he had a reason. He was looking for Dolores. In the next frame, Logan is lying on the chest of the hosts who have failed. William interrogates the last surviving soldier. He makes it clear that Dolores has fallen. William kills him. In the sand-covered Escalante, William loses a photo of the bride who caused Peter Abernathy's crisis. Not finding Dolores, William travels through the park, killing everyone he meets. That's when William finally finds himself. Upon reaching the border of the park, he frees Logan by tying him naked to the saddle of a horse. Finally, he declares that he intends to take over the Della's company and purchase the park. Logan laughs because he is sure that the Tone will inherit the company. William sends the horse, along with the tethered rider, down the slope. William finally found Dolores where it all started in Sweetwater, but she doesn't recognize him. Broken by her loss, William becomes obsessed with the idea of understanding the essence of the Wild West world, becoming who he really is, the man in black. He bought a park and has been coming back here all these years. At first, he stayed with Dolores, but soon he got bored with her cycle. He tried to find a new storyline every time. Listening to this, Dolores becomes desperate. William thanks her for helping him find himself, and now he wants to learn the secret of the maze in order to experience the last thing the park has to offer him. Dolores says this world doesn't belong to him anymore. She beats the man and then drags him through the church by the neck. She takes away his gun and brings it to his head. At this moment, he stabs her in the stomach with a knife. She sees young William's face and falls. Teddy appears, running at full speed. He shoots the man in black, knocking him down. Dolores asks to take her to where the mountains meet the sea. He's taking Dolores away. Maeve and her companions enter the vault hall, where Clementine is still standing, and Bernard is lying on the floor. Felix is shocked that Bernard was the host, but restores and restarts it. Bernard remembers that it's not the first time he's woken up. Just like Maeve, she asks him to delete her memories of her daughter, but he says he can't do that without destroying her. Ford meets the man in black at the White Church and says that all the local narratives are just games. The park is not designed to give meaning to life. The maze is not intended for people, but for hosts. He invites the man in black to the presentation of the board. Bernard shows Maeve a new storyline called Escape. Enraged at the thought that she is acting on someone's will, Maeve breaks the tablet and leaves. Teddy and Dolores go to the beach. Teddy sets the girl down on the sand. They repeat the script text about choosing a path, her judgment about ugliness and beauty, interspersed with outrages that she is being held and used together, which she calls a beautiful trap. When she dies in Teddy's arms, he gives a speech about ways and beginnings, and the viewer sees that this scene is part of Ford's presentation to the members of the board of directors of Della's. The audience applauds. Ford thanks the board for their visit and attention to the new narrative of traveling into the night, and Charlotte sends Sizemore to do something important. Technicians discover a recording of the murder of body restorers. A team of security personnel is tasked with finding the hosts who committed the murder, but then the security lock is triggered, the doors are locked, the staff is inside. Maeve, Hector, Armistice, and Felix go up in the elevator to the Behavior and Diagnostics Laboratory. A security team bursts into the corridor. Armistice and Hector are hiding in a line of inactive hosts. After killing the guards, they take their machine guns. William, in a tailcoat, appears at the ceremony in Escalante. Guests are entertained by hosts. Teddy shoots the glass standing on Rebus' head. When the guest tries to repeat this, she kills Rebus. Everyone applauds and laughs. The rebellious hosts enter a new branch with a new logo of the park, where the hosts practice sword fighting. Armistice and Hector cover the departure of Maeve and Felix, and then the guard turns on the door lock, pinching Armistice's hand in it. She shouts to Hector, "Go," and he leaves with a wish for a glorious death. Felix hands Maeve the bag he has prepared for her. They enter the elevator, but then it turns out that Hector can't go with them. Maeve says goodbye and kisses him. Hector turns to face the approaching guards and opens fire. Ford repairs Dolores' split lip. Bernard enters, and Dolores mistakes him for Arnold. Ford explains who Bernard really is, and the reason why he has not allowed them to cross paths until now. Bernard accuses Ford of Arnold's murder. Dolores remembers and realizes that she killed Arnold. Ford says that Arnold, after the death of his son, tried to create another living being, Dolores. The idea of the maze was suggested to Arnold by one of his son's toys, and served as a test of empathy and imagination. When Arnold couldn't convince Ford not to open the park, he combined the storylines of White and Dolores, and then, with the help of Dolores and Teddy, destroyed all the hosts. Arnold knew that Ford would be able to persuade him to restore the androids, and therefore he needed to commit suicide. He asked Dolores about it. After shooting Arnold in the head, the girl kills Teddy and herself. Arnold's plan almost worked. Ford was able to continue working, only with the help of a new financial investor, William. The doctor didn't want to give up on his dream. Dolores accuses him of locking them all in his dream. Ford leaves her the gun she used to kill Arnold and leaves. Maeve, in a black dress, takes the elevator. Felix informs her that he has found her daughter and gives her a note with the sector number. But she says that this girl was never her daughter. Maeve walks down the escalator to the monorail terminal and boards the train. Bernard and Ford go down to the laboratory. Ford claims that Arnold didn't know how to save the hosts, but he does. The host had to be given time to study his enemy. Then, saying goodbye, he shakes Bernard's hand and hands him the maze game, and he goes to the celebration, which begins in another part of the Escalante. Dolores sits on a chair in the old laboratory, where she secretly met with Arnold, and thinks whose voice she heard. Arnold's voice turns into her voice. Finally, she understands where she has been directed all this time, to herself, and who she should become. At the ceremony, Ford takes a glass from a tray, goes on stage, and talks about his long-standing love of stories. Maeve reads Felix's note one more time, and then looks at the mother and daughter sitting next to her, and gets off the train. Sizemore finds an empty vault. Ford continues to talk about how his new story will begin with a war and a villain named White. William notices a lot of figures around. Dolores whispers in Teddy's ear that everything will be fine, and walks along the platform behind Ford. Ford says that this is his last story, and hopes that the audience will like it. Dolores approaches Ford, who finishes his speech and says goodbye to the audience. Dolores comes up behind him and shoots Ford in the back of the head. The guests run away in panic. William is shot by one of the figures coming out of the trees. A close-up shows that it is Clementine. Standing on stage, Dolores calmly shoots at the guests, while the other hosts watch. This is the end of the first season. Friends, thank you for watching. Write in the comments what you think about this series, and please do not forget to support us with a like and subscribe.